you have to remember that like you will never see these people again. So if you're that person whose baby is screaming, you might have a really hard time for an hour or 2 hours, but you will never see these people again. You're going to get off that plane just like everybody else, and everyone's going to go about their day, and they might say later like, oh, there was this crazy crying baby, but what can you do? And hopefully people are really nice. In my experience, people have been really nice. Well, welcome everybody to another mom group chat. Today I'm joined by Brooke and Kira, members of the Every Girl Media Group, and we are talking about first travels with baby. So between the three of us, we have domestic flying experience, international flying experience, and lots of road tripping experience with babies. So we are hopefully going to answer some burning questions about how the logistics of traveling with a baby, especially for the first time, all go. I would just love to dive into everything from getting to the airport, navigating the airport, the actual flight with baby, and then on the road trip side, just all the logistics of packing the car and hitting the road with a little tiny one. So let's start with flying with the baby first. So Kira, you have one son. Remind us how old he was when you took your first flight.
Yeah, so when we took our first flight, he was 4 months old. He's now 11 months old, and thankfully, we've not flown with him since, but we do have a flight booked in April of this year.
Are you anticipating that upcoming flight to be harder or easier than flying at 4 months old?
I feel like he did really well at 4 months old. He actually did better on a flight than he does in the car, which was kind of surprising. And I honestly think it's because he's just such a active mover boy baby. He always has been. He does not like to be stuck in the car seat. When we got on the flight, he at first was totally fine because everything's new and he's taking it all in. But he very quickly got bored and wanted to kind of move around, which was the nice part about flying, is we could get up and show him new things. And everybody was really nice to him too on all of our flights. So it was a pretty good experience. 4 months.
How long was that first flight?
We flew from LAX to Georgia, Atlanta to Manchester, England, which is where my husband's family lives. So the flight from LAX to Georgia, I believe it was 5 hours. And then Georgia to Manchester was, I think, 6 or 7 hours. Long flights, but we tried to break it up, which I actually think probably would have been better to just do one long flight, unless you have a toddler.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I really do. The going up and the going down was so hard for him because obviously it's painful. It's not nice for us either, but we understand what's going on, and it's not hard for us to equalize our pressure in our ears. So that was the hardest part, honestly. I feel once we were in the air, once you hit 7 hours, I would say, on a flight, you kind of get delirious and delusional, and the rest of it kind of just is what are we doing? So to do it twice felt like we were doing a lot more travel than if we were probably just to stay in the air, is my opinion, at least. I could be totally wrong. We will see in April.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say breaking it up was helpful because the fact that your very first flight with the baby was a 12-hour trip, I mean, probably more than that,
Yeah.
all said and done, sounds so intimidating to me. And Brooke, I know you have done 12-hour car rides with your daughter, right?
Yeah.
That is so long.
Yes, but it honestly more intimidates me what Kira did, where you are stuck in a tin can with a baby. That to me is more terrifying. We went originally the route of car and then continued to do the car route every time. And so yeah, the plane thing terrifies me, of not being able to leave your seat or maybe right in the aisle just a little. So it's impressive.
Yeah, and my first experience, so my daughter was 3.5 months old, so pretty similar age to your son, Kira, when we flew for the first time. And our first flight was a 1-hour trip. And I was like, this is going to be great. This will be a very short, easy flight. By the time you get up, you only have to kill so much time and then you're back down. So I was not so intimidated by the first flight in terms of duration. I was more intimidated by the logistics, the packing, the navigating the airport, or even before the airport. Are we driving our own car and parking? And what are we doing about the car seat? How does this all work? It is a whole new world of thinking through what you're going to do. That first trip, I just thought of it as little stages. I was like, okay, first we need to get packed. Then we need to get to the airport. Then we need to get the bags checked, through security, then get to the gate, and then you have to take the actual flight. And the whole time during that process, I kept saying to my husband, like, we did it, okay, we did it. And he was like, we did one tiny part in like this grand scheme of what we need to do. And I think he finally exhaled when we like got off the plane at our destination and we were there. But I just had to break it down into like all these little parts. So I'd love to go back and talk about the packing for a trip like this, whether it's flying or driving. We can start with the flying part. And again, internationally seems like a whole different ballgame to me, Kira. But specifically, like stroller, car seat, feeding supplies, like things to entertain your baby on a flight. Like, how did you begin to tackle all of that, Kira?
Yeah, that's a good question. To give a little bit of an insight into me, I'm just pretty type B, so I like didn't have like a list or anything. I just kind of was like, well, he needs a stroller, which at the time was his Doona, so that also is his car seat, so that made it a little bit easier. And then everything else was kind of just like, okay, well, what does he need in the day? And like, let's just put it all together. I think the most stressful part of all of it was the feeding element, because when they're so little, no matter what you're doing, unless you're fully breastfeeding, which I can't speak on that because I don't have that experience, but no matter how you're feeding your baby, there's so many logistics into like sanitizing, extra bottles, extra formula, or if you're pumping, like how do I clean my pump parts? What do I do with the milk? All of that was extremely stressful. And I truly like kind of just put it off because I didn't even know what to do. And we like waited pretty last minute to figure out like, okay, what are the rules associated with like pumping on a flight? What do they have to provide for you? And at that point, I was primarily pumping and giving my son breast milk. We weren't really doing formula, but we brought it just in case. And I'm so glad we did, because I forgot to put ice in our ice chest because, you know, life, and you're at the airport and everything's stressful. And so everything that I had pumped, I would give him, but everything extra, which I didn't make very much, I was planning to put on my ice cooler. And we were on a British Airways. The thing about British people is they don't have ice in anything. Like they drink lukewarm everything, which is gross, but whatever. So they didn't really have much ice on the plane, and they're allowed to, I guess, say no to me. And so I had no way of storing the milk I had pumped for him,
Oh my gosh.
or storing then the milk that I had prepared to bring with us. So that was the biggest disaster and very annoying, because it was kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do? And then they're like, why don't you just breastfeed your baby? And I'm like, well, wouldn't that be great?
Wait, did someone really say that to you?
Yeah, it was a guy, so like of course he doesn't understand, but one of the flight attendants was like, why can't you just like breastfeed him? I was like, why can't I don't know.
Gosh, in an ice situation, I would have been like,
yeah.
that
Was the worst part about traveling. Honestly, just that one singular experience. Everything else with like my son did amazing. He hardly cried. He cried one of the flights going up in the air because we were stuck on the runway for like, I want to say an hour, and the AC wasn't working, and it was just really hot, and babies, they can't do temperature. Like it needs to be the right temperature, and we're stuck there. We can't get up. We have to stay in our seat. That was the only experience where I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? Like, get me off this plane. I'm never doing this again. But as soon as the AC turned on, as soon as we got all the way through the air and we're through the clouds and we're up, he was fine.
That's, I think, a really tricky part about flying versus driving is like, at least when you're driving, you don't have to worry as much about packing as expertly. And you're in control. You can stop, you could pull over, you can do whatever you need to a certain extent, I would imagine. But yeah, the pressure of flying and like, we're doing this. And I was really scared about like, what if we get snowed in?
Mm-hmm.
We were going to Florida. So like, this isn't even, probably a thing. But like, what if we're stuck at the airport? What if everything gets canceled? Like I was just running through so many contingency plans. What if we're stuck on the tarmac? What if this 1 hour flight turns into a 4 hour flight? Like I was kind of spiraling with that thinking. But I agree with you, Kira. The hardest part for me was the gear and the logistics of the feeding. I have heard from other people that there's pros and cons of different ages with flying, and I imagine driving too, Brooke. But some people are like, the younger your baby is, the more like sleepy and chill they are and easily entertained. Like it's so much easier. But then you have all the feeding stuff associated with that. Maybe when you get into toddlerhood, you can like have them sit with maybe a tablet, or they can like chill, I don't know, or they can like have a tantrum and it's a nightmare. But someone told me like when they can eat real food, it's just like easier because you don't have to worry about packing all of the things. Similar to you, Kira, I am an exclusive pumper. So breastfeeding, but with bottled breast milk that I'm pumping, but we are combo feeding. So I was bringing formula and breast milk supplies, and having the flexibility of both was great, but it kind of like doubled the amount of supplies. I had one huge bag of like my regular pump, my wearable pump in case I wanted that instead, so many bottles, so many formula things, like extra formula. Like I just, and I didn't even really deal with, because you were on a longer haul flight, obviously, I didn't deal with having to pump and then store. Like I pumped before we left the house. Any bottles that I had, you know, I knew she was going to consume within 4 hours. So I could just like feed it to her in real time on the go, not have to like cool it, store it. So yeah, all of that is a lot. Or for anyone, you know, traveling without baby too, and then you're pumping and you're bringing breast milk back, and it's hard with the refrigeration aspect to store. And even when you're driving too, I don't know what your feeding journey has been like, Brooke, but walk us through a little bit of the feeding logistics of a drive.
Yeah. So I breastfeed exclusively still. So it's kind of, to be honest, I just because pumping didn't work for me, I would have loved honestly to have that. Quite a few of my friends the exact same time as me were able to do that, and they were kind of given tips like this will help you a lot, and I'm like, I love that, but none of them will work for me. You know, none of those tips are going to apply for me. And we had not introduced formula at all or tried it yet on our first trip. Our first trip was when she was 3 months old, just about to turn 3 months, and it was that first 12-hour, you know, one-way road trip. And, you know, I didn't think about, you know, preparations before of like, let's just bring formula in case I need to. And in the end, that was like probably the biggest thing I learned is, you know, just have it as a backup, you know, because at that point in time, we didn't know whether or not formula was going to work for us or combo feeding was going to work. But being able to have that as a backup would have been great because first baby, don't know what I'm doing still. Go home. You know, luckily we were going to where we're from. I'm from Kansas. So going back home from Texas to Kansas was less stressful in terms of knowing what we were going to, you know, to be around. Not like we were going on a trip. Like I have no idea the environment we're in or anything like that. We were around friends and family and back home. So that was kind of a comforting thing. But we ended up being too busy and everyone's like, well, I want to see the baby. Let's go here and let's go there. You know, you introduce this baby to everybody and you're just going between all these different places. And learning to say no is always a hard thing for me. And so I had overcommitted to, you know, a lot of things. And so my supply went down significantly while we were on the trip. I wasn't eating regularly. I was not drinking enough water, enough fluids. And so my supply that was pretty much just sufficient enough. I'm not an excess producer of milk. And so it was just enough at the time. And then when I was like starting to my supply was going down, I got more stressed. So it became a mixture of my baby is hungry. I don't have any formula. We've never tried formula. And I also cannot produce enough. She's going to starve. Like it got dramatic feeling, you know, and 1 or 2 panic attacks, you know, later with having a screaming colicky baby because she was pretty colicky her first 12 weeks too. It ended up just, you know, getting to the point where we went to the store, got formula, and it kind of soothed the whole issue. And I'm like, wow, if I would have just brought some formula just in case, it could have helped a lot. So yes, breastfeeding exclusively is difficult. It's great in sometimes because I'm not worried, you know, I don't have to worry about the refrigeration aspect or anything like that, but it definitely has other aspects that I did not anticipate having. I always kept thinking like, well, I am her food. So it'll be great. I'll just feed her whenever I need to. And in theory that works. But then when you're out in the real world, that doesn't work exactly as, you know, planned. So that was kind of the situation for me on our first trip and pretty much every other trip after. But I did learn to bring some formula and drink enough water.
That's such a good point though. Like I was so worried about how my daughter would do. Like we're taking her out of the house in a big way, and like will she sleep on the go, and will she sleep in a new environment? I did not really consider, you know, that I'm also, as a new postpartum mom, taking myself out of my bubble of just being home and doing what I need to do for feeding. You're pulled in so many different directions. I think we all had in common too that our first trips with baby were all to like visit family. Yeah. So it is kind of this like debut of like everyone wants to see you, everyone wants to see the baby. You're like tired, you're pulled in so many different directions. So it's not surprising to hear that your supply was affected, unfortunately, but that's like
Yeah.
such, I wouldn't even really think about that. Or I
Yeah.
didn't as a first time mom.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
think you'd almost be more
That'll,
comfortable. Like, I'm going to family, I know I'll be able to eat because they'll bring me, food, or you like think you have this huge support system, so you'll be totally taken care of. And you are in some aspects, but then you're also giving so much because you're like, yeah, we'll bring the baby to see you, and then we'll bring the baby to see you next. And then you're like, actually, if we would have maybe been on a trip to just focus on our little family, I probably would have eaten regularly and drank regularly, or, gotten enough rest, or whatever.
yeah. Yeah. So how did you manage breastfeeding while on the car ride? Like you're stopping
Yeah.
every couple of hours? I mean, you have
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
right?
People, always said, worst case scenario, you can just hover, like hover and nurse. Like, I'm
People
not
do
sure
that,
I'll
but
do
that sounds
that.
very hard.
Yeah. 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 It's like, well, you can't take the baby out. So you take yourself out and hover. And I'm like, I don't know if I'll do that. But so I still have never tried that. I don't know if I'll probably ever recommend. I don't think that's recommended really safety wise either. But so we kind of planned this right from the start before we took this big trip. We knew it was gonna. We've done this quite a few times, just me and my husband. So we knew it was gonna be long. We knew what stopped. What kind of stops we want to take along the way, how we normally do. Obviously, we factored in there's going to be a couple of more. But again, my baby had colic pretty bad the first 12 weeks. And so we knew she needs her naps without a doubt, or else it will be screaming the entire drive. And she needs to be able to have consistent food. She was nursing about every hour, every 2 hours if she was awake at the time. And so I'm like, that's going to make for the longest car ride ever if we don't figure out. So what we ended up doing is leaving probably my biggest recommendation, honestly, with at least a newborn, is building off your most recent feeding in the night. So if that's 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., it helps for us if it's still dark out, because then she kind of continues her sleep. She's full on a full feed, and then we leave in the car and get like our first we've got it down to about 4 or 5 hours we can get into the drive with her, having a feeding and then going down in the car. I kind of drape over obviously like the little cover on the car seat, and she can just nap for the first 4 or 5 hours. And then we kind of got in a routine of stop 2 hours, nurse, and then go another 2 hours. And I did bring, while pumping is not easy for me, if I drink tons and tons and tons of fluid, I don't know what it is. I like cannot pump normally. But if I really try to implement a ton of water and liquid before, I can try to get some, like I can kind of get a little bottle. And so I work really hard in the car to like hydrate up, and then I can pump a little bottle. And so we kind of alternated. It was like 2 hours on and then stop and nurse, and 2 hours on bottle feed so we can keep going. So it's like whatever can get us that next 2 to 3 hour stretch was how we kind of managed the feeding and large segment of driving, how we like broke it up.
That makes total sense. I feel like you just learn so much on that first trip.
Yeah.
And I give you so much credit for being like, we're doing this 12 hours. Like, we'll just figure it out. Because I don't
Yep.
know. My husband and I are talking about visiting friends and driving 6 hours.
Yeah.
And my daughter has just never been in the car that long.
Yeah.
So I just am like, I don't know. It could be a 6 hour drive that takes 12 hours because if she's just like, get me out of here, like, you can't do anything besides either keep going or stop. So how do you like,
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, in opposite of planes where you're like, you have to make it, you can't miss a connection. You can't, because you have to make the next plane. At least in a car, you can be like, we get there when we get there. We set no
True.
expectations on arrival time. We get there when we get there. So
yeah, there is a lot more flexibility with the drive. But to your point, Kira, I was so intimidated by like, okay, we have my husband and I, so I guess it's double the amount of space, but it's like, we have this much space to entertain a baby and do everything we need to do, feeding, changing. I mean, we didn't change her at the seat, of course, but it's intimidating and I am not someone historically when I've traveled pre-baby that ever gets up and walks around on a plane. But the second we were with her, I'm like, when we can get up, like I'm getting up and walking because it is helpful for me and her. And I was so intimidated by it, and literally no one on the plane cared. Everyone was like, your baby's so cute. This is so nice. I feel like as long as your baby is not screaming, people are like, do whatever you want to do.
100%. And even when they are screaming, if they do care, I don't care. Like I've given up all expectation that I'm going to be able to control a baby or a child. Like we do our absolute best, and that's all we can do. And if they want to be miserable about it, that's on them.
Yeah, I was very scared of that. I was like, she will scream. I mean, I had no proof that she would. Like she was a perfectly happy baby, but I was like, if she screams, I feel like I am going to like break out in a full sweat and it'll just be horrible. And my daughter was totally fine. But what somebody said to me before the flight was like, you just have to remember, and this goes for like everything with a baby, honestly, being out in public with a baby, you have to remember that like you will never see these people again. So if you're that person whose baby is screaming, you might have a really hard time, as will your baby, for an hour or 2 hours or 12 hours, Kira, but you will never see these people again. And like the way they react to it, the way you react to it, like you will do anything you can to, you know, help your baby. But you're going to get off that plane just like everybody else, and everyone's going to go about their day, and they might say later like, oh, there was this crazy crying baby, but what can you do? And hopefully people are really nice. In my experience, people have been really nice.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. The first flight we went on, the guy behind us directly was like, oh my gosh, the stranger next to him, it's going to be a long flight. And our son was like, perfect. That flight, at least. Like, thankfully, he wasn't on the one after, but he was perfect. And it felt really good to like stand up and smile at him and be like, was it a long
I was going to say,
flight?
that would have made me nervous. I would have been like, oh
No.
my God.
No, I was just like, wow, you're so miserable. What's wrong with you?
It's true.
I don't know. I feel like children are such a gift. And if people have an issue with the way they behave, it's not our fault. We can't control.
Especially a tiny baby. It's like,
Yeah.
they can't help it. Like,
I
we're
know.
all just in this together.
You know, you think that the people around you care a lot about it, but no one cares as much as you do that your kid has been screaming for an hour. Or, so, you know, it's like for as much as you think it bothers them, it bothers you more that you're having to, you know, so everyone is like, at least I don't have to deal with a crying baby for an hour and try to, you know, that's at least what I always thought pre-kid. I'm like, you know what? At least we don't have to be in their shoes and try to figure it out. And it's hot in here. And are we there yet? And, you know,
Yeah,
totally.
And I wish we had a perspective for toddler travel, because I am definitely a little bit more nervous with that. With a baby, there's only so many things. It's either they're hungry, they have a wet diaper, they're tired, they're overstimulated. But like with a toddler, God knows, I have no idea what to do. So at that point, I feel like it's just like disassociation till you get there is what I would assume people do.
Yeah, when they're so little, I mean, everyone's like, they'll just sleep. And in my experience, so we went on like a 2-leg trip for our first. So we actually took 4 flights in total by the time we were home. And each one was its own experience, I will say. The very first one, though, that 1-hour flight, she was a dream. It was the morning. And I was like pep talking her when we were like at the gate. I was like, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to get on this plane. It's going to be different. You've never seen this before. Like, we're going to get settled. You're going to go right to sleep. And I was like, we're going to have a little bottle. People say, you know, takeoff and landing, feed them. That's helpful for the ears. In my experience, I think it was helpful. I don't know. Like, a passy also sufficed. Like, it was fine. And also, they're just going to kind of cry if they need to cry going up and going down. But I was like, we're going to have a little bottle, and then you're going to fall right back asleep. And then you're going to wake up, and then we'll maybe play a little bit, and then we'll be there. And she actually, like, really did that. The first 2 flights we took were in the morning, and while it sucked getting up at like 4 a.m. to like get to the airport and make a 7:30 flight, whatever, I felt like she was much more chill in the morning and sleepy and content. On the way home, we took 2 flights later in the day, and it was way different. It was horrible. She was like, you know, by the end of the day, they sometimes have longer wake windows, and she was just like fussy and awake and overtired. And then we were like feeding her to like help the situation. It was the only thing that like would stop her from crying. And then she was just like projectile spitting up all over the place. So pack extra outfits, and maybe pack layers for yourself, because by the time I left that flight, I was covered in spit up. And thankfully it was like the last one we were going to be home, and I really could care less about my appearance and that I was covered in spit up. And I was like, I am soaking wet. Like, this is crazy. Thankfully I had lots of extra outfits for her. But a takeaway I had, and I don't know if this is for all babies, but I felt like flying in the morning was a way better and more blissful experience than flying later in the day or even at night. She had an easier time sleeping and just was like more content.
Yeah.
So that was one takeaway I had.
I agree. Our hard flights were at night. And I feel like there's something to that. Like, we as an adults probably get more grumpy at night too. Like, we're tired. It's been a long day. So
totally.
I feel like it makes sense that they do better in the morning.
So Kira, you and I both traveled with the Doona on flights. I feel like, and I think I'm speaking for you as well, that the Doona is like the best thing ever. especially for flying. I thought it was so great to have the stroller and car seat
Yeah.
combo in one.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to flying and traveling, like 100%, it's so helpful. It wasn't my favorite as like an everyday stroller, but I don't think it's really intended to be that. We just like used it that way. But for traveling, it was great. Did you gate check yours or did you, because you said she was on your lap, right? You didn't book her a seat.
Correct. Yeah. So I think you can with the Doona, just like any other car seat, if you buy a seat,
Mm-hmm.
you must, collapse the wheels and install it like a car seat. But no, we did the lap infant thing. And yeah, we had the Doona like through the airport. The only bad thing about the Doona, I would say, is just it has no storage underneath. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have like another stroller, you can like throw all your bags and all your crap under there. We didn't have that, so we were lugging more ourselves. But and some people say like wear your baby in a carrier and then you can like have the Doona and throw stuff in the Doona. Like there's lots of different ways to do the kind of trek through the airport. But we just had the Doona and we just tried to pack as concisely as we could with check bags is my I know it sucks because you have to pay for them, but you gotta like check bags. I packed with the aim to have as few pieces of luggage and bags and things as possible going through the airport. And that was like difficult to do because like if we had nothing else, we still had a diaper bag, obviously, for her. And then I couldn't fit most of my feeding supplies or particularly like the pumping supplies in her diaper bag. And I had, like we said, extra bottles, extra formula, extra stuff. So I had like a whole separate bag that was just feeding stuff. I actually feel like packing it that way was helpful though, because I knew what could go like in the overhead bin or under our seats on the plane. And I was like, this feeding bag needs to be like with us at all times. Like if we're without a toy that's in the diaper bag or something, like she can play with an empty water bottle or an empty cup, like that'll entertain her. But like we need the feeding supplies easily accessible. So I think we had like a diaper bag, a feeding bag, and then like a personal item for me, a personal item for my husband, like one rolling suitcase. Like we tried to keep it as buttoned up as possible because you're just lugging so much to the airport and through security, and it's just like a lot to manage. But that was a long tangent to say, yes, we had the Doona, and I found it really helpful. And yes, we gate checked it. We gate checked it.
Yeah, I love your tip about separating the feeding stuff. That's such a like, well, duh, but I did not do that, and it was all mixed in with all of his other stuff. And I honestly think the most overstimulating part about traveling with a baby was just the fact that it was like, where is that? Where do I find that? There's so many things to go through, and now you're like, and they need it right now, and people are staring at me, even though they probably weren't. But that's how it feels, and you're like, I'm trying to make them quiet. It's so overwhelming.
Especially
So
with like making like we were making some formula bottles and I feel like my husband would like be holding her and then I'm like making the bottle and even having it in one bag I'm like getting out the formula powder and then I'm like putting the water in and then the powder and then mixing it together and where's the cap and 30 seconds feels like 3 hours in that moment where you're the baby's crying and you're just like make this bottle as fast as you can.
so real. So you said that when you traveled in the car, you had something that like covered, I'm assuming,
Yeah,
because the Doona doesn't have like a, this is my one thing with the Doona. It doesn't have like a cape per se.
I've
I
seen
don't know how
that.
else to
Yeah,
explain it.
yeah.
And my son is like such a FOMO baby. So we have figured out that the reason he won't sleep in the car is because it's stimulating him. Did you buy anything on top of like what comes with her? I'm assuming she has like a carry
Yeah.
seat.
Yeah. So the seat that we have is part of like her stroller. I don't have a Doona. So again, I'm
Mhm.
gonna preach to people who probably like, yeah, my stroller does the same thing. But we have a car seat that completely, obviously takes out of the car seat, goes into a stroller. We also have like interchangeable parts. It can turn into a bassinet or it can turn into a bunch of
Mhm.
different things. But our car seat has like like whatever it's hard to know what that is, but it has the thing where you can completely pull basically halfway of her. And then I literally just bought like one of those little Velcro straps that has like a little cloth that just kind of like lays over the rest of it. She doesn't necessarily, my baby's also very FOMO. And so she doesn't necessarily love it day to day, but I did notice at the beginning of the day when it was dark out and I didn't want her, this is maybe messed up. I didn't want her to know that it was like morning time yet. So I would completely keep it dark as long as possible. And it kind of just kept her sleeping longer. So that is really the only time I've ever used it. But I just literally bought like a cloth piece to kind of like lay over. It was not fancy, probably a couple bucks online, and it helped extend that first stretch of our drive from nighttime to, or when it was dark outside to light outside, so that she didn't wake up right away when she saw the sun, coming right into the window. We also have the little suction cup things that go on your window. I, just because the drive is so long and we pass through like 3 major cities on the way home, I don't love having that up just because it's harder for us to see. So I don't really use that personally. I think it could maybe work for some people, but again, it's just, I don't know, for safety for driving, we didn't ever use it. So
Yeah, I've been like searching for, so my son's in like a full, convertible car seat at this
yeah.
point because he's almost a year old, and he is very much sleep trained to the point where any even ounce of light at this point is waking him up, and it's
Yeah.
a problem
Yep.
if we ever want to do anything during his wake that's not during his wake window. So for
Yeah.
example, a road trip, how do we get him to sleep in the car is the biggest
Right.
concern that we've had. And to be honest, it just probably would entail him freaking out, crying so long until he falls asleep from crying.
Yeah.
My husband and I were talking the other day, we're like, someone needs to invent like what is the
A
title?
slumber pod?
The slumber pod for a car that's safe. And I'm like, is it going to be safe? I don't know, but that would be so helpful.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen something like that though, where it's like an accessory. It doesn't come with a stroller, but you can strap it around, and then there's like a little unzip hole like in the center where
Uh-huh.
their head is. So if you wanted to like unzip it and like kind of check in, but like they're basically completely surrounded by like a globe of a black cloth. I don't have that product, but I feel like I've seen my friend have it.
That's so hard though, because I've considered like if we take a road trip, I'm like, I guess we have to leave at like 2 in the morning. So she
Yeah.
just sleeps for the first 6 hours. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, you need a gadget otherwise. To wrap up our conversation, I would love to ask each of you to give some advice to our lovely audience. So if you were talking to someone who's traveling with their baby for the first time, say next week, what is the biggest piece of advice, a tip, a hack, anything you would give them? Kira, do you want to go first?
Sure. I would say to make the most of the time. I know people say this a lot, but you're never going to have them this little again. And you will look back when they're a year old or, 2 years old and think about, oh my God, I was so stressed about XYZ. But in reality, we had so much fun and she was so small or he was so small. And now they have big opinions and loud voices, and it's a different time and a different experience. So make the most of it because it's super special.
Yeah.
That's the thing is we need to remember that like while traveling with the baby is certainly challenging at times, you're making memories as a family and you're doing
Mm-hmm.
something so fun and so amazing. And even if they won't remember it, like you guys will,
Yeah.
and all the people you're visiting will, and it'll be such a special memory that first trip for everybody. Brooke, how about yours? Anything road trip specific?
Yeah, mine's probably going to be a car tip. What we learned through time and time again is probably to pack like a survival kit that is truly like everything that you would need, not like convenience or well, oh, that would be nice, but like we need this, whether it's from, the mom as in pumping or breastfeeding or any of those items, and then whatever the baby needs in one survival kit by you in the seat, because there's nothing worse than having all the items but they're all in different luggage spots in the trunk packed away that you will not be able to grab at all on the road trip. So I just have gotten used to packing one survival bag, and that kind of is my ride or die the entire trip.
That is so smart, easily accessible.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
goes for the plane ride too. Like,
Yeah. True.
put it all in one bag and have it at your feet, I think.
Yep.
I think my biggest piece of advice would just be let go of all expectations. Whether you're flying, whether you're driving, something's going to go wrong. Your baby will spit up all over you. You'll wish that you packed an extra outfit, but there's no room anyways. So you just get through it. And like I said before, almost all of the people you're interacting with on this flight outside of like your immediate family, you will never see these people again. Don't worry about people like judging you. Don't worry about the baby crying. We're all just doing the best we can, and you will get through it, whether it's a 1 hour flight or a 12-hour flight or a 12-hour car ride. Like, take it one step at a time. Things will go wrong, things will come up, but in the end, have a healthy dose of delusion as well,
Yeah.
because everybody does it, and you're not the only one in the airport or on the road with a little one. And we're all just, that's motherhood too. We're all just out here winging it and taking it one step at a time, and we're all good.
I love that. That's so real.
Well, thank you guys both so much for joining today's Everymom Group Chat recording. To those watching, thank you for being here. Hopefully we answered some questions you might have had about first trips with a baby and gave some good tips and advice to tackle that first vacation away from home. Is it called a vacation if you're traveling with a baby? I don't know. You always hear that. It's like, it's a trip, not a vacation. Visit theeverymom.com for even more helpful pieces of content. We have so many articles about traveling with babies and really kids of all ages. Our Everymom Travel Hub, which is a yearly resource we publish on the everymom.com site, includes tons of tips and destination recommendations, hotel recommendations, all the things, travel trends, all the things you need to know about traveling with babies, toddlers, little kids, big kids is all over on the everymom.com and on our Instagram at the Everymom. Thank you guys. See you next time.